Let's start this month's episode with an event that demonstrates the love for retro that exists out there, namely GBJam 5, which ran from the 1st to the 10th of October. It asked people to create a Game Boy themed title, but you were restricted to 4 colours and a screen resolution of 160 by 144 pixels, but there were still 400 entrants. Several great games were created, but the one that ended up ranked first was called Derelict. No, Derelict. Second for this section is that Brutal Doom 64 was released for the PC, and is a far more visceral and improved version of the underrated Doom 64 for the, you guessed it, N64. It's free to download, but you can donate to the developer's Patreon if you're feeling generous. I've given a link to it in this video's description. Finally, Sony posted an image on its Twitter account showing recent PlayStation 4 release Rise of the Tomb Raider in a PS1 case, but it doesn't seem to be something that's available for the public to buy. What a tease! The 3DS's eShop was the service that got the most retro love last month, but that's sadly not saying much. All the same, it received a quartet of SNES ports, namely Super Castlevania 4, Super Ghouls and Ghosts, and Breath of Fire 1 and 2. The Wii U, in comparison, received no retro releases. It's almost as if Nintendo recently switched its priorities on the home console front. Moving on to the PlayStation Network, the PS4 received an upscaled port of PS2 cowboy simulator Red Dead Revolver, as well as Rez Infinite, a HD re-release of Rez with a 1080p resolution and added VR elements. It also received Duke Nukem 3D, 20th Anniversary World Tour, as did the Xbox One and PC. It's an improved and expanded version of the 1996 classic. To round off the new, old releases, a special edition of Xbox RPG Jade Empire was brought to iOS devices and Mac, and an official licensed release of Catacomb 3D is now available for the Amiga and CD32. Finally, there was the slightly bizarre announcement that largely forgotten Xbox platformer Voodoo Vince is to receive a HD remaster for Xbox One and Windows 10 early next year. Whatever next, a remake of Blinx the Time Sweeper? Not much for this section this month, but one hobbyist did decide to tinker with his ancient Playmates Fun to Drive dashboard, a classic toy from 1985, so it can play a variety of old games. It doesn't get much more retro than that. To round off this somewhat barren segment, the Kickstarter-funded Amiga 1200 cases are, apparently, almost ready to ship. Pretty exciting, I know. Almost as if to make up for the lack of retro elsewhere, this month's Homebrew section is packed. Let's start with the titles you have to pay for, which includes Sector 88 on the MSX2. It'll cost you €12 to download and €42 for a cartridge. Next is Flappy McFur for the Atari Jaguar, with a copy setting you back $45 plus shipping. Then there's MSX shooter codename Intruder, with a cart costing €39 plus shipping. Finally, on the paid games front is Adios a la Casta Episode 2 for the Amstrad CPC, with copies available to purchase for €10. Now the free stuff, starting with a trio of ZX Spectrum titles, Harbinger Convergence, Mysterious Dimensions, and Crazy Kong City Episode 1, Saving Helen Blonde. The Reset 4KB coding competition also took place last month, and saw a load of titles for the Commodore 64 being developed, with all of them being, as you may have guessed, 4KB in size. There are far too many to list, but you can check them all out by following the link in this video's description. The same system got another title away from that competition though, called Let's Invade. Other than this, there was Russian Roulette and Basic Championship Wrestling for the NES, Space Hawks on the Master System, and Towering Inferno for the Intellivision. And yes, the latter is indeed based loosely around the 1974 film of the same name. Moving on to Homebrew coming soon, Boss for the Atari 2600 was successfully funded through Indiegogo, and will be launched in December. Pico Interactive also announced that it will produce 6 new titles and 1 re-release later this year, with these including Smart Mouse, Sumo Slam and Generals of the Yang family for the Mega Drive, Custodian on the Atari Jaguar, Snacky for the NES, and finally Iron Commando, Kotetsu no Senshi and Legend on the SNES. Those titles will start being shipped out in December, with prices varying from $35 to $75 US. A remake of Jetpack for the Mega Drive was also revealed to be in the works, and to round off this section, a pair of brand new Atari 2600 titles are being developed as well. The first of these is Cat Quest. It'll use a Venetian blinds interlacing technique, which according to the developer minimises sprite flickering. Second is Pac-Man Eat and Run, and is a version of the classic maze game that asks you just to eat the fruit. There are no pellets here. It's probably best that Pac-Man kicks his pill addiction anyway. It's obvious where I should start this section this month, with the news that developer Michel Ancel revealed new images and a video of his prototype of Rayman for the SNES. The ROM cartridge was apparently left unplayed for 24 years, but Ancel has not yet said whether it'll eventually be released to the public. One thing is clear though, despite having no limbs, Rayman could certainly afford to lose some pounds, going from this footage at least. Next is that a Kickstarter to make cartridges of Socks the Cat, an unreleased SNES title featuring Bill Clinton's feline, was launched last month. A $40 pledge will allow you to get your paws on a copy of the game. To finish this section, 2 playable, but unfinished, builds of Commodore 64 games were released online, namely Red Baron 3000 Preview and Charlie Chaplin. There were several fan translations released last month, with the most notable Hideo Kojima's Police Noughts for the Sega Saturn. Other than this, there were English translations for Bomberman 64 and Chameleon Twist on the N64, Xbox title The Wild Rings, Rushing Beat on the SNES, Vixen 357 for the Mega Drive, and 2 NES games, Delinquent Girl Detective 3 and Musashi no Boken. And finally there was, rather unusually, a translation for a ZX Spectrum title, namely the Russian-developed The Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. That's all for this month then, but thanks so much for watching, and if you want the show to continue, please do consider subscribing to Retro Revisited and liking this video. You can also listen to all the music from this instalment by clicking that box on the left, and there are also links to almost everything mentioned in this episode in the description below. Bye for now.
I can fight with confidence in this bird.